Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lori Mattson, President and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's membership luncheon, sponsored by Payne West Insurance. We have the privilege today to hear from Vicki Charlo, the Executive Director of the Columbia Basin Development League, which is handling the completion of the Columbia Basin project. The Chamber works diligently to feature topics that are of regional importance, and water is just that. As you're hopefully aware, the Chamber is leading My Tri 2030, the Regional Vision Project. Over the summer, the Chamber's Regional Affairs Committee held all-day workshops focused on 6 opportunity areas identified as unique to our region: education, energy, inclusion, life, prosperity, and agriculture. Each workshop featured 30 experts in their respective fields. The participants at the agriculture workshop mentioned the importance of the Columbia Basin project as a top priority many times throughout the day. Fast forward to September, Vicki Charlo's op-ed, Why Water Infrastructure Investment Matters, it appeared in the Tri-City Herald. In it, she explained that water infrastructure, like the Columbia Basin project, isn't just for farmers. It literally affects everybody in this room in one way or another. Water is something that many of us take for granted. In a bit, Vicki will update us about the project's challenges and the future potential. Before we get to the program, though, we'd like to recognize the elected officials that have joined us today. So I'd like to ask you to please stand and remain standing, and we'll hold our applause to the end. We're fortunate to be joined by some state representatives today. So we have Joe Schmick, State Representative for the 9th District. If you could please stand. Mary Dye, State Representative for the 9th District. Bill Jenkins, State Representative for the 16th District. Some local electeds, we have David Milne from the Pasco City Council, Chuck Torelli from the Kennewick City Council. We have Vicki Gordon, a Port of Pasco Commissioner and member of the Board of Trustees for the Columbia Basin Development League. Thank you. And we have Stu Nelson, Franklin County PUD Commissioner, Jamie Daniels, District Director for Congressman Newhouse, Josh Lozano, Deputy District Director for Congressman Dan Newhouse, and I was told that we're also joined by Kennewick Mayor Don Britton. So again, if you could, no one's standing, so there we go. We'll just try that again. I'm going to do this again. No, I'm kidding. All right, so please help me thank our elected officials for joining us today. They're all being humble, right? They don't want all that attention. All right, so if you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd sure appreciate it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. I'd like to recognize another group of people. Last week was Veterans Day, and that's a day where we honor those that have served our country. I'd like to invite all of the former and active duty military personnel to please stand so we can honor them and thank them for their service. We'll give you a moment if you served in the military actively, or that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. All right, on Monday, January 13th, representatives from Governor Inslee's office will be in the Tri-Cities to hold a public workshop on the findings of their recent completed Orca Task Force study relating to the Snake River dams. So here to talk more about the workshop, including how you can get involved and help save our dams, is Jason Herbert. He's the chair of the Tri-Cities Legislative Council and Director of Government Affairs for Energy Northwest. Please help me welcome Jason.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So Lori's introduction already took away the first couple lines that I had in my speech. So I'll just jump right in. I think everyone in this room is familiar with the efforts that have been going on to remove the lower Snake River dams. Last year, I think the Washington State Legislature passed the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which sets us on a path to 100% clean electricity by 2045. In that bill, hydropower was recognized as renewable, including incremental federal hydropower. That was a big win and a change from previous iterations of this legislation. However, 2 weeks later, the legislature also passed an appropriations bill including almost $1 million for a study that would go through the Orca Task Force to examine the possibility of dam removal on the lower Snake River dams. If this seems incongruous to you, you are not wrong, because it is, and only 2 weeks apart. I think we all know the importance of the dams. They are reliable, they're carbon-free, they're renewable, they provide enough power to power the entire city of Seattle. They also provide vital irrigation, navigation, recreation, and transportation benefits. I would call these efforts to remove them short-sighted. And as Lori said, we're going to have a workshop here with the governor's office and the Orca Task Force where they will present their findings related to the possibility of dam removal. This event will not be a public forum or a public hearing as it was originally billed, but an opportunity to hear their results. However, we think this is the time that we must make our voices heard on this issue. It is not going away. The Tri-City Legislative Council and partners in the region will hold a rally here at 4:30 p.m. The workshop will start at 6 p.m. We're hoping to show overwhelming support from the Tri-Cities to protect and preserve these dams. So please attend. We hope we have a very strong showing, and we're going to try to get everyone out in time so that they can get in to the workshop and we can have a robust audience in the front row there to get our point across. The governor's office has also released a survey where they are asking people to give input on how they view the dams and their value. All of this information is on these cards that are on your table. I promised Stephanie I'd hold it up, and now it's stuck in my pocket. So if you need it, it's here. We created a new link, snakeriverdams.com, where you can go and fill out the survey. We encourage all of you to do that. We have a tall task ahead, and the proponents of removal are endowed with resources we simply cannot match. But we must show that removal is not a solution. It is simply a segue to greater problems, more problems in the future, and finding solutions to those problems will ultimately fall on communities like the Tri-Cities. We cannot sit idly by, hoping that reason will prevail. So far it hasn't, and it probably won't in the future. We must not capitulate to the might of the West Side. We must vindicate the right, and preserving and protecting our dams is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for serving as the chair of the Tri-Cities Legislative Council and for being here today to share this important news with us. Next, we're going to welcome our new members and announce our Member of the Month. So please help me welcome the Chamber's Vice President, Elizabeth Holt.
Thanks, Lori. And as you're all welcome to our expected, I'm announcing some of the Chamber's newest members who are able to join us today. So thank you for coming. And if I announce your name, please join Lori on stage and accept your membership plaque. And then we'll pose for a group photo. So first we have Josh Candle with Cougar Digital Marketing and Design. We have Jim Hubbard and Shane Fowler with Centimark Roofing Company. Steve Simmons with Bite at the Landing. Dorothy Stevens with Homebridge Financial. Joan Woolard with Hiraki Center Northwest. And we have Jerry Surduk and Dwayne Hull with McKinstry. Great. Looks like everybody showed up today. Oh, yeah. Just a couple more. So while they're getting gathered here, let's just give all of our new members a round of applause. Thanks for joining the Chamber. Next, I'd like to recognize some of the Chamber's longest standing members. If you could draw your attention to the screen, the members listed have been active with the Chamber for 20 years or longer. Let's give these members a round of applause as well. Last but not least, I'm excited to announce the November Member of the Month. This month, the Awards and Recognition Committee has chosen TCT Computer Solutions as the November Member of the Month. TCT has been a member of the Chamber since 1994 and most likely active that whole time. I think probably all of you knew Jill and most likely gave your card to her as you were walking in the door. Jill has been a chamber staple for many, many years, and we are very, very lucky to have her. And as a testament, I have to tell you that Jill was actually here before I got here today. So pretty cool. Thanks, Jill. Please help me welcome George and Jill Hefter, owners of TCT Computer Solutions, to the stage, and let's give them a round of applause for November Member of the Month. Thank you to all of our outstanding members.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's give Elizabeth a round of applause. She's organized this event and worked so hard on behalf of our members. And I just want to say a special thanks to George and Jill. Jill's probably one of the first people I met. She's been at the chamber longer than I've been at the chamber. So great former board member and ambassador of the year and really great supporter. So thanks so much for everything you do. All right, we're going to move on with our program. I'm going to bring Derek Stricker, our chair of the board, to lead us through the rest of the program. Please help me welcome Derek.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori. I'm thrilled to be here today and to learn about this Columbia Basin project and learn more about the importance of the project to our local Tri-City community and the quality of life we have here. But before we get our program going, our luncheon sponsor, Payne West Insurance, has an opportunity to say a few words. So please help me give him a nice warm chamber welcome to Nate Fulton, Agribusiness Specialty Practice Director at Payne West Insurance. Thank you, Nate. Come on up here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure for us to be here. We really appreciate the opportunity. I'm Nate Fulton, the Ag Practice Leader at Payne West Insurance. Payne West, who are we? Well, we've got 30 offices, 750 employees across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. There's almost always a woohoo after Montana. There it is. So, you know, at Payne West, we live by our 3 C's. That's clients, communities, and colleagues. There was an interesting moment when I joined Payne West 2 weeks into my career there. We had a client who had a massive, massive fire loss. By the time it was all said and done, it was a $70 million fire loss. And, you know, it was one of those typical moments where you get a phone call at like 5 in the morning on a Sunday, and it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? We rush over, we get to work, we try to get them put back together. But, you know, at the end of the day, what turned out to be one of the worst moments in this company's history, they're now rebuilt. They're back up and running. They've got a state-of-the-art of the operation. So we were thrilled to be a part of getting them back on their feet. Community, another one of our 3 C's. Payne West believes in being good community partners. This week, as a matter of fact, is Payne West's Random Acts of Kindness. And there was a couple colleagues of mine who, just on their own initiative, decided to go to a couple local schools. And they went to the principal's office, asked for the folks who deal with the school lunch program at the school. And all they wanted to know was, do you have any kids here who are behind on their school lunch balances? You know, and they said, well, actually there's quite a handful of kids that are behind. And so our colleagues anonymously took care of those balances for kids. And I just think it's one of many really cool examples of what our folks do in their communities. And our 3rd C is colleagues. You know, we provide great opportunities for our colleagues, for our employees. All 750 of us are really pleased to work for an independently owned insurance agency that's just purely focused on serving those 3 C's. And so for us, the work we do with our clients, communities, and colleagues is personal. So before I turn it over to one of my favorite people on the planet, Vicki, to hear about her presentation today, I'd like to share with you just a quick video about Payne West to give you a little bit better idea of who we are. So thank you very much for the time and enjoy your lunch.
What makes an insurance agency a company you'd want to do business with? Should they share the same values you do? Invest in the same community you do? For us, there is more to insurance than just getting it right. For us, it's personal.
It's personal
because we know that our community is a direct reflection of what we put into it. It's personal because you are more than just another policy.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Payne West Insurance, for sponsoring today's luncheon. And let's dive into this. Without further ado, I'm going to give you a little background on our main speaker today, Vicki Charlo. For over 30 years, let me get this microphone better for me. For over 30 years, Vicki has developed and managed organizations, projects, and programs across the U.S. and Mexico border serving the agriculture. Through her consulting company, 501 Consultants, Vicki and her staff currently manage the Columbian Basin Development League, Washington Wine Growers Association, Washington Wine Industry Foundation, and provide project-specific or grant management for several other nonprofit organizations in the area. Vicki was raised on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in agricultural journalism and a minor in agricultural economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Master's of Public Administration at the University of Washington Evans School of Public Affairs. She got the education part down. She's here to educate us on the project. Please help me welcome Vicki Charlo.
Well, it's either I got the education part down or I was looking for a job. I'm not sure which. Thank you for coming today. For those of you that were on the email chain, thank you for allowing me to go into some sexy numbers today, because we're going to be talking a lot about the Columbia Basin Project. And I don't think that there's a person in the room who doesn't recognize the value and the importance of that project. And even if you don't really know much about it, the impact is on you every day. You just may not remember or notice. So what we're going to be talking about today is that irrigation isn't just for farmers, and it really isn't. But to start with, I really do want to share the perspective of a farmer. So let's start there.
Dry, flat, remote. That's how you might describe the Columbia Basin in central Washington. This desert landscape receives only 10 inches of rain a year, but through the Columbia Basin Project, water from the Columbia River is slowly transforming the region. This reliable water source holds the key to the future for farmers, communities, and agriculture in the state of Washington. You probably haven't heard of these towns or met the farmers who call them home, but you feel their impact every day.
Farming is hard work, but there's also an exhilaration and an amount of pride to see the results of your work. I love walking into grocery stores and watching people buy groceries. The fact that you're feeding all these people, it's just amazing to think about.
Clark and fellow farmers in the Columbia Basin produce over 100 different crops in one of the most productive farming regions in the United States. And for many farmers like Clark, growing has become a family tradition.
Always have been a big family man. The more of my family I can get around me, the better. Passing off the farm to the son is a moment to be proud for sure. Matthew and I have always been really close. To see him after a few years gone, I think the farm was where I'd like to be. That was a good day. It was a good day.
Grand Coulee Dam in Washington State, the world's biggest concrete structure.
Over 75 years ago, the state and federal governments saw the value in irrigating the Columbia Basin by diverting just 3% of the Columbia River and promised to bring water to over 1 million acres. The plan was to expand and ultimately complete the project over many decades, and as the water began to flow, every town and farmer eagerly awaited its arrival.
Water on the land, and on the land, crops growing in the Columbia Basin.
As farmers waited for project water, many were permitted to dig wells. Over time, this practice has become both risky and expensive.
Well, the first well that my father drilled failed after 5 years. The second well that failed was a shallower well, the 500-foot well. That one totally ran out of water. Well, that was the first well that we moved over and basically didn't get pumping water until 2,500 feet. Every year it's dropping, boom, boom, boom. To re-drill a well, you'll run $1 million. The problem with that situation is there's no guarantees either. Some of those people out here have drilled these wells and haven't got the water. So it was, I had to walk away.
Clark and his son Matt aren't the only ones struggling to get water. Clark's County Commissioner Mark Stedman is feeling the impacts across the region.
I've been talking with a number of farmers, and their static levels in their wells are decreasing yearly. We're mining water at such a rate that it will never be replenished.
This is water that was put there during the last ice age. Once we take it out, it won't be replaced anytime soon. So there's an environmental crisis here in terms of declining groundwater that's affecting not just farmers, but rural communities that are having trouble now getting water out of their normal wells.
For instance, Othello has had to drill a new well a number of miles out of town and actually pipe it into the town. Moses Lake has had some issues with well water.
And then even rural domestic use. Some homes that have had water for over 100 years are now reporting trouble.
It's a regional issue.
The solution for Clark's water problem and the answer to other struggling farmers and communities was set in motion all those years ago.
The Columbia Basin Project was meant to provide irrigation to what was a very arid and dry plateau and try to turn that into viable agricultural land. And, that dream has really come true in a lot of ways.
With nearly 700,000 acres currently irrigated, the success and economic impacts can be seen across the state and country.
The original dream was for 1 million acres. A little over half of that project has really been built out. It is some of the most incredibly productive agricultural soils anywhere in the nation. We grow over 100 different variety of crops out there. Anything that you could put your mind to it grows well if you put water to it. You're talking $1 billion worth of products and associated jobs annually. And not only did the Columbia Basin Project provide sort of an agricultural base, but it also provided recreational, wildlife, and fishery areas. And so there's this huge fabric of wetlands, of lakes, that I think really add to not only recreational benefits, but environmental enhancement as well.
But for farmers who haven't yet received water, unreliable wells are the only option to keep their farms alive.
At the beginning of the season, there's always the time we have to go out and turn on those wells for the first time. And you think about it for a few weeks to come.
Everything looks pretty clean and ready.
Right now, it's like going to Las Vegas. You don't know if there's going to be water coming out of that hole or not. Irrigation water was promised to us out here 50 years ago. And the state of Washington would have never issued water right permits for us to be doing what we're doing without the promise of that water showing up on these farms. And so with the millions of dollars we have invested in equipment to farm, we're waiting. Am I going to throw another $1 million into keeping that thing going because it's going to be another 5 years? Or will the water be here in a year or two and just try to get by until then?
With hundreds of thousands of acres yet to be irrigated by the Columbia Basin Project, Clark can't sit idly by.
I've been to DC 4 times, been to Olympia 4 times, and our focus right now is finding funding.
It's important that the federal government and the state government, with its local citizens, work together. This is an infrastructure that is worth cooperation.
There's another 500,000 acres out here that could really bolster the Pacific Northwest economic engine.
Water is life. Take the water out, and what would the Columbia Basin look like?
Clark's family farm may disappear before Columbia Basin project water ever reaches it, but Clark is standing for something bigger than his farm. He's standing for a community, a state, and a country that puts people to work, cares for the environment, and supports economic growth.
This is the only area in the United States that has not been fully tapped for food production.
Why is it valuable? Why should we continue to put more money into it? I see the opportunity to grow more crops more efficiently than anywhere else in the world. And that's really the opportunity that the Columbia Basin Project provides, and one we should not squander.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, and we put that together a couple of years ago to enable us to make sure that the people we talked to in Washington, D.C. and Olympia really understood the magnitude of the issues that we're facing in the Columbia Basin Project by it not being completed. You can go back. Is that the next one? So just to give you scale, this is the size of the Columbia Basin Project. So it goes from the north in Grand Coulee Dam. I'm sure most of you have been to the dam and seen at least the light show once. If not, I highly recommend it. And to Pasco, here we are, all the way to the south. And on the west, you've got the river, and on the east, you have people waiting for water. And I have my very own. You snuck it up here without me noticing. So the organization I represent was created, it actually started working in the late 50s, but they were organized officially in the early 1960s. But we're stakeholder-driven, nonprofit, and our board of 30, in fact, we have a couple of board members here today, they really are people who care about the communities in the Columbia Basin Project and around the project and throughout the state. So many of them are farmers, but not all of them are farmers. We have county commissioners in all the counties, we have elected officials, we have many people who care deeply and understand the long journey that this is going to be. So our job really is to support development of the Columbia Basin the development project itself, but in the short term, we have the Odessa Aquifer to deal with. In the long term, we want to see the project completed. That's the job of the organization that we represent. So the Columbia Basin Project is really the single reason that most of these small communities in this region even exist. This is not a list of all of them, but for example, Quincy, Moses Lake, Connell, Othello, Warden, Mattawa, and I'd be willing to bet a fair amount of money that even a good portion of the Tri-Cities. But why? Okay, so it's water, but who cares? Yeah, water, a whole bunch of places in eastern Washington. So this started a very long time ago, and this is the part that I think that even we who have been around this issue for a very long time tend to forget and need to be reminded every now and then, that it was in 2002, as in 1902, that the U.S. government created the Bureau of Reclamation and created and passed the Reclamation Act with the intent to create water storage and irrigation networks, converting desolate, arid lands in the West, and particularly in eastern Washington, for habitation and cultivation. In 1933, President Roosevelt made the decision to start appropriating funds, with the help of Congress, of course, to build Grand Coulee Dam for jobs and for power. Things were kind of put on the back burner a bit then because we had this war going on. And in 43, the Columbia Basin Project was authorized by Congress. And that's when the building really started in earnest to finish the project. So this is the dam, what it looked like before it was a dam. So in 1948, the first irrigation water pumped from the Columbia River. About 5,400 acres actually came out of the river down here, not behind Grand Coulee Dam. And Randy Mullen, where are you? Randy's still farming one of those the first block. So those 5,400 acres are still being farmed, and the very first part. It took a few years beyond that before the system was really in place to start pulling water out from behind Grand Coulee Dam, and then 66,000 acres were irrigated. So fast forward, actually not so fast, but slow forward, you've got from the early 50s to the 80s, pumping plants and infrastructure were built. Incremental growth, you heard on the video that it was, from the beginning it was planned to be slow and steady. Moratorium on the Columbia River went on, and not a whole lot happened for many years. In the 90s and 2000s, there was a lot of people that waited for water and were given permission to dig deep wells while they waited. So for those of you that maybe have even been to the dam and didn't realize what you were looking at, that little red circle up there, and that little bitty, looks like a stream from this angle, that's the irrigation water pulled from Grand Coulee Dam for the Columbia Basin project. So this is the, from on top of those pumps, if you see where this arrow is here, if you're looking from the top down, these are 12 pump lifts. They pull the water from Lake Roosevelt to Banks Lake. It's all for irrigation. And these little buggers can actually go in reverse. So when electricity is needed, they can actually create electricity too. The wonders of modern technology back a very long time ago. So that water then keeps coming downhill. It keeps coming down this way into these ginormous, when you see the signs that say do not swim here, there's a reason for that. These things are huge. So if you look at the size of this main canal and the size of if you can even see the people in there, a little in the vehicles, they're very large conveyances of water. To allow them to do this, to bring water down to hundreds of thousands of acres of agriculture and community use for irrigation. But that's the easy part. We knew that. What you maybe didn't know, I guess anybody that, people like Randy probably do know this, and anybody that farms down in this half of the project, so most of that water is actually used twice. Talk about recycling. Twice. So a lot of the water from the north collects in potholes, reservoir, basically regurgitated, and it's used again. I think that's one of the coolest things about the whole project. So that you can do this not once but twice all over the Columbia Basin project. Oh yeah, there's more. So Grand Coulee Dam, yes, we all know that yes, irrigation. But I'm fairly certain you do remember that it's there for power as well. Also flood control. You do remember that one of the biggest reasons, and it was even negotiated in the Columbia River Treaty, that they put some of these dams in, especially Grand Coulee, was so that Portland wouldn't flood. And a lot of the communities upriver from Portland. But there's also the municipalities that have access to and that are built from the impacts of the Columbia Basin project. There's fish and wildlife habitat. And most of the people here, actually probably most of the people in Western Washington, if they know anything about water in Eastern Washington, they don't know they're playing on, fishing on, or whatever it is they're doing on water thanks to the Columbia Basin project. So that project provides $5 billion with a B economic activity in this region. Another reason the Tri-Cities might be impacted by the Columbia Basin project. Over 100 crops are grown. So yes, it's about farming, but what also we tend to forget, especially in this area you see it, is all the processing that goes with that. All the infrastructure that goes with the processing and the agriculture. And oh, by the way, it attracts 3 million visitors for recreation. Lots of them, certainly from Eastern Washington, most of them from the other side of the Cascades. So multi-purpose benefits. If you read all the pamphlets on the table that the Bureau of Reclamation has put together, they talk often about multi-purpose benefits. So let's delve in a teeny weeny bit into what multi-purpose benefits even means. So it's power, right? It's the largest hydroelectric facility in the U.S. We have it here. And they do power for the Pacific Northwest, certainly, and Canada, and beyond, and California had their way, we would probably be shipping a lot of it down there. Flood control, certainly. Portland, God bless them, and a lot of the communities upriver have the dams, and this one in particular to thank. Municipal and industrial users, there's a lot of users throughout the Eastern Washington communities, including Moses Lake and Othello and Worden and Bruce and Pasco and Connell and Quincy and Ephrata and et cetera, et cetera. But don't forget about recreation. There's a lot of recreating that happens on these reservoirs and on the lakes that are created. So Lake Roosevelt itself, of course, Banks Lake. I mean, I remember the drawdown, what was it, 2 years ago when they were fixing some gates? Oh my word, there was an outroar over our lake going down. And I'm like, whoa, no, it's a part of the irrigation project. Moses Lake, Potholes Reservoir, et cetera. But the fish and wildlife, the habitat that's created and is benefited from is huge. There's 350,000 acres of land and water just for recreation. 350,000, that's a lot. There's over 140 lakes, ponds, reservoirs. Grant County, you know the one that goes around Moses Lake, the most heavily fished freshwater county in Washington because of the project. That's impressive. That brings a lot of people in. But those 350,000 acres of land and water and the 140 lakes and ponds, it's also home to part of the Columbia National Wildlife Refuge. Wetlands, ducks, geese, sandhill cranes. Have you guys ever seen, hopefully you've witnessed sandhill cranes either coming or going? Outstanding. My poor staff, when we drive back and forth, they have all seen every back road between here and Wenatchee looking for sandhill cranes. I particularly like sandhill cranes. I think they're kind of cool, and we go tracking them every year. That's probably not one of the reasons I'm your favorite human, but you know, we'll just add to that. So it's a refuge and it's a migration stop on the way through, either south or north, either way. But you know, the project's not done yet. We're only 3/4 of the way there. Clark is still waiting. So this, while it might be a horrible map to put in a PowerPoint, I strongly urge you to actually go to cbdl.org because this is an interactive map. And what this does is all those colors on the far right-hand side show, if you click on them, it highlights what's developed, what's undeveloped, what's the East Columbia Irrigation District or South or Quincy, but it also shows you the areas that are yet to be developed. So this will give you the magnitude of what's already created, but also what's left and waiting for water. Because once we get the rest of the project done, we can continue on with the impact of the crop diversity and the processing that we have in Eastern Washington and that impacts the entire state. All these products have to be processed. They all have to be picked or harvested. Many of them go through the ports. Port of Seattle, Port of Tacoma, Port of Vancouver. And many of these are added value. So it's not just for fresh product. For example, the lovely basket we're going to give away later has got some wine grapes in it. It's actually got wine in it, but they came from wine grapes from the project as well. So the value added, every time there's an additional step, there's that economic impact that comes back to those communities and back to the farmers and back to the processors and back to the community. So the employment, and these numbers I think are quite dated, so I'm going to call this an ultra-conservative estimate of what most of these numbers are. But the amount of employees that just agriculture from irrigation is created in Adams, Franklin, and Grant counties. And then if you take that on, as the processing wheels keep turning, you add another up to almost 40,000. Just to give you a general idea, it's often been said that agriculture is the state's largest employer, that 160,000 jobs are tied to agriculture in the state of Washington. Boeing has 80,000 employees in Washington. Amazon has 53,000 employees in Washington. And Microsoft has 47,000 employees in Washington. It's fair to say we're probably, even if these are conservative, they're probably the largest. And I'm also betting there's a whole bunch of people here in a capacity that can deny these numbers because I think they're horribly low. Because this is from an economic impact statement that was done by the 3 irrigation districts, but I'll bet it's been 10 years, if not more. So ignore the numbers and just assume that they could even have a few more, like another 0 on it. But look at the difference in the magnitude of irrigated land value versus dry land. So the people that are waiting for water and they have dry land, if they have dry land, say wheat, Adams County, this is per acre of property tax value, a couple $100. Put water on it, you're into the thousands. And like I said, I think these are very conservative, but I think it's the magnitude and the difference. It tells a story here, not necessarily the actual number. So you put water on land that is incredibly nutrient rich and just waiting is impressive. But remember Clark Cagle and his family, who, by the way, sits on our board, they're waiting for water. They're still waiting for water. So the reason for the Columbia Basin Development League is because we want to see that last quarter done. It's like a football game. We're almost in the final quarter of the game. I'm beginning to wonder about our quarterback. So that last quarter, while we're waiting, and again, we knew it was incremental growth. We knew it was going to be a slow process. But the challenge when the moratorium started, and we basically had to get permission from the state to be able to continue to pull water from deep wells, which they did willingly because everybody knew the Columbia Basin project was going to be finished eventually. One of those aquifers is the Odessa Aquifer. And the Odessa Aquifer is a no recharge aquifer. That aquifer also provides the water for Moses Lake and a lot of the other small communities like Warden. So now you have a competing factors of community and the farmers that were given permission to dig and use water from that deep well, many deep wells, hundreds of deep wells. So these communities are in crisis. These communities are seeing their wells going down or drying up. They're having to dig water from out of town and pipe it in. So we've been working diligently in the short term to get this resolved as one step to finish the Columbia Basin project, but certainly we need to be able to save these communities. So the bottom line is all we have to do is get the infrastructure built. So the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program, a project by the Department of Ecology, Bureau of Reclamation, many of our state and federal elected officials, I think they're almost tired of hearing us talk about OGWRP, the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program. But the idea is to build infrastructure. It's canals, it's siphons, it's being able to get the farmers that are pulling water from the deep wells onto surface water, getting them irrigation water so the water that's in the aquifer is safe for the communities. It's we're not going to get into the politics of all this because there's a whole bunch of it. But suffice it to say, there's huge state investment, like $100 million investment. Department of Ecology has been a great partner in this project. The federals level, we've got buy-in, they understand what needs to be done, but money is even tighter at the federal level than it is at the state level. So that's been a real challenge for us. We think the Bureau of Reclamation and the Fed should step up and step in with some checks. Haven't got there yet. And for those, for people like Randy and all the rest of the farmers that actually pull water off the Columbia Basin project, you get to pay all that back. You get to pay for the water, and you get to pay O&M, and you get to pay for infrastructure. So this free water, not so much. But the idea is that when Randy gets water and when Vicki Gordon gets water, and they invest in the community and they invest their kids in school and grandkids in school, and they have hospitals and they have communities and they have grocery stores and they build the infrastructure to process the potatoes, that's where the community comes in. So when we start talking about water not being just for farmers, that irrigation isn't just for farmers, it really isn't. It's really about saving, in the short term, saving the Odessa Aquifer so that we can finish, that red circle is largely the Odessa Aquifer area. It's a huge portion of the Columbia Basin project. We need to be able to get the process done to get those farmers on surface water, get them off the wells. So I'm going to end with irrigation really isn't just for farmers. It is synergistic. We're all in this together, but it's for families, it's for communities, it's for jobs, it's for fishing, it's for wildlife, it's processors, boatings, ducks, sandhill cranes, and much, much more. Learn more at Columbia Basin, cbdl.org, or see me afterwards. We'd be more than happy to sign you up as a supporting member. Thank you for having me today.
We have a few minutes, so if you have a question for Vicki on anything that she just presented about, please raise your hand, stand up, and she'll address it. Any questions?
Vicki, what percentage of the water, the Columbia River, comes out to irrigate
for this
Columbia Basin
project?
Yes.
Less than 3%. So that big circle in the very beginning where you saw the pumps going up, it's like that little stream going off to the right is what's pulled out of Grand Coulee Dam. So it's a lot of water, but it's a small amount as compared to what's behind Grand Coulee Dam. Good question. Other questions? We have lots of experts in the crowd, so if I can't answer it, I know who can. Yes, sir.
Not an expert on land, but my question is, why is it taking so long? We're in the fourth quarter. Why would it take to do a touchdown now?
Where's the touchdown? Yeah, I know. You should join one of our board meetings. I'd have to say that the environment we live in now, it's not as easy. Number one, the money isn't available at the federal level or even the state level for these kinds of projects. These are huge infrastructure projects. You know, and people talk a great deal about transportation and infrastructure and being able to reinvest in roads and in bridges. And people understand that kind of infrastructure. If you talk about infrastructure for the Columbia Basin project and a canal or 8 laterals to the tune of several million, many million dollars each, and you start adding that up, the magnitude of scale and the magnitude of the zeros on the projects is mind-boggling. And then you start looking at the return on investment and the benefit-cost ratio. It's even more daunting. So there's many more rules, many more both state and federal laws and policies that are in place that weren't maybe in the beginning. I mean, the president that kicked this all off had the ability to have the vision and the money to immediately invest and had a war that needed the power and needed to put people to work. You know, we don't necessarily have those kinds of pulls on what we're trying to accomplish. And frankly, right now, we have less than 2% of our population even understands or is from the farm. We don't talk about it enough. We don't emphasize and underscore the value of production, agriculture, and farmers in the U.S., let alone the state of Washington, which is really sad. So that's why irrigation just isn't for farmers. Thank you. Good question. Yes, sir. Ma'am. Ma'am.
Hi, Vicki. Deb Bone-Harris with Franklin PUD. Does the Columbia River Treaty have any impact on the Basin project whatsoever with Canada and the U.S.? You know, I'm just looking at Grand Coulee. I don't know that answer and just wonder if there's any impact at all.
We have been a noisy, squeaky wheel in that process, trying to make sure that irrigation is even at the table and considered, because initially it wasn't even, it was like an afterthought, and it wasn't really the core purpose of the Columbia River Treaty at all. So we just keep reminding, along with all the rest of the people that use the river, say, irrigation, don't forget about agriculture. And that's true, actually, I think from our Canadian farmer friends as well as the U.S. farmer friends. It's not just us whining about being ignored. It's important, but intentional. So I can't say not at all, but we don't want to be forgot. Yes, sir. Hi.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Can you put any kind of a number on that final quarter, or any guess? Just idle curiosity.
This is a reporter asking me this question, right? See, what do we do in our media training when somebody wants a hypothetical or a conjecture? You probably want more than a lot, right? It's going to be more than millions. And the challenge that we have, even with the projects we're looking at, number one, if we do them ourselves and don't have the federal government do them, number one, it's faster and cheaper. Duh. Sorry if I'm offending any federal employees here. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast, right? I'm not trying to be offensive there, but it's just the nature of the beast. But that said, if we don't, there's such a magnitude of investment that it would take at the state and federal level. And the longer we put it off, and the longer we do it incrementally, you have interest rates, and you have just the cost of living, and everything just keeps going up and up. So the number just keeps expanding at such a rate that it's billions. I mean, it has to be. Several 100,000 acres of water, and the infrastructure isn't all built yet. So, a lot.
Hi, my name is Oscar Suarez, and I just had a quick question. What can we do here in the micro level to impact this, to help it go forward?
Awesome question. Make noise, write letters, call your elected officials at the state and federal level. This is exceedingly complicated issue because you have private land, federally owned project, water that comes through the state of Washington in terms of a water right from behind Grand Coulee Dam, and everything that's done has to be according to the Bureau of Reclamation's engineering code, right? So you have this Rubik's Cube of politics and players that you move one piece and all of a sudden you get all the wrong colors on the other side, right? So it's, for those of you that have ever seen Star Trek, it's like playing chess on 3 levels at the same time. But that's probably not great encouragement, is it? But I would say try to do as much homework as you can personally, but also remind people the value of something as boring as agriculture and farming to the communities that we live in, because it is all interconnected and we can't do one without the other. Thank you.
Hi, Vicki. There's immense amount of pressure on the Snake River dams and what's happened in the court level. And I would say come to the rally at 4:30 on the 13th of January. I will see you there. But are you facing any kind of opposition like we've seen in the Seattle Times, where there's now a demand to take down the Bonneville and the McNary and the John Day? Can you speak to what we're up against as far as opposition?
Well, I haven't heard anybody promoting taking out Grand Coulee yet. That said, I think that what we're facing in terms of the Columbia Basin project is just pushing on and encouraging the slowness, slowing everything down, slowing the process down, throwing lawsuits at it when that's convenient to slow things down. Establishing, case law that can, change the course of something into the future. So there's so many roadblocks, and we have, I think, taken so much for granted historically that we're just now in our fourth quarter going, whoa, we need to really engage here. We really need to step up our game. Yes, sir.
2 things. One, my name is Ted Voss. If it becomes an economic boom for the state to get a return on their investment, it seems to me that may be a good place to focus on. But the second question is, how do I phrase this? Are you dealing with the people that are saying that we're killing all the salmon in the world over here, and the dams are killing everything in the ocean and we should take them all out? And do you guys face that at all?
Yes, but I think in a different way than perhaps the Snake River dams do, because we're getting some of the same messaging, just it doesn't include the word dam. Well, at least not dam as in water. That one. So, part of the frustration here for me is that we're operating somewhat almost in silos when it comes to some of these issues. And it's easy for those other 97% that work, frankly, against some of these interests and some of the economic impact, the value of the ROI. So, we divided, we fall. That's working well for them. But I also think in terms of the economic investment, the one thing I learned in going to school and having a minor in ag econ is every ag economist, every economist has a different way of counting and of evaluating anything. So just because it's a great return on investment to me, or the benefit cost ratio works in my head according to my numbers, you could do the same ones and prove me wrong. And they do. So be careful anybody can use statistics. It doesn't have to be all for the same outcome and purpose. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki. A lot of lessons in there to learn. And if you wanted I didn't know the massive effect of Portland we play up here in that role. But as a chamber, you just see the small business and the backbone of these communities, and we see the impact, and it's right around us in our backyard. I think we do. We have resources right in front of us presented today about the survey, about the rally coming up, about letting it just be educational, knowledgeable, reach out and talk about it, because a lot of it is, every time we talk about it, we learn a little bit more and clarity of what actually is in our backyard and how important it is for all of us. So before we adjourn, I want to welcome our program director from the chamber, Logan LaPierre, up here to give away some of these door prizes. Please welcome Logan LaPierre.
Hello, everyone. So I actually pre-drew and I won all the prizes, so thank you so much. All right, so first up we have, I wrote all of this down so I'm prepared. We have an estate Syrah from Bill Jenkins. It won Best in Class and 2 double golds this last weekend. So that is going to Dwayne Hull from McKinstry. All right, next up we have a gift basket from the Port of Pasco. Has a lot of stuff in there that looks quite amazing. That is going to Claudia Lara from Gisa Home Loans. So congratulations, Claudia. All right, next we have a complimentary ticket to an Ask the Expert session. That goes to Mandy Wallner with City of Richland. Congratulations, Mandy. All right, and lastly, we have another fine bottle of wine from Chandler Reach. That is going to Chris Davis with Mass Mutual. All right.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Logan. All right, and thank you to today's speaker, Vicki Charlo, for coming here and educating us on the project. Payne West Insurance for sponsoring today's luncheon. And well attended up here. Thank you so much. The staff of the Red Lion Hotel and Conference Center in Pasco. And to all of you for being here today, one round of applause. Thank you. Before I let you go, though, next month's luncheon, December luncheon, is going to be a big one. We're hosting General Jim Mad Dog Mattis on December 18th for a conversation about leadership. Excuse me. It's bound to sell out, so please register and RSVP early, and hope to see you in December. So before you go, thank you so much for coming here, spending your time educating, collaborating, and please have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you.